Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast, Season 3, Episode 7, your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. What's on tap for this episode? Money. An episode about money. Money, abundance, and freedom. The outlook that Americans have on money, the priority that we place on it based on the latest poll from the Wall Street Journal, and its relationship to the sale of the Washington Commanders by one Daniel Snyder. And a little public service announcement about life insurance. What are the costs, the fees, the expenses inside of a life insurance policy, and what are they for? Thank you to all my listeners. I do appreciate your time, your attention. Please like, subscribe, thumbs up the podcast. Please give it a review if you haven't already. Send it far and wide to people that you love, people that you hate. I don't care. Just send it. Please, if you like what you hear, visit This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast on Patreon and support so that I can take the podcast out of the Stone Age, stop trying to light fires by rubbing two sticks together. Enough of the intro. Let's go.
Act 1 Money, Abundance, and Freedom.
So I went to the store today, and I actually looked at all of the prices of the items that I was buying. I feel like that's a common phenomenon and doesn't really warrant or merit bringing up on the podcast, and yet it dawned on me that but a year ago, I would not have looked at any of the prices on any of the things that I was buying. I believe that this is a common phenomenon of most Americans over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, that there's been this disconnect between those of us who haven't had to place so much attention on things like food and rent and other types of goods, and the significant amount of the population that had gone from living in an apartment, having a job, having a car, to being homeless. I raise this as an issue because I was part of a generation that had grandparents that lived through the Great Depression. They were scarred by the Great Depression. They had a sense of poverty and lack that just permeated the way that they looked at the world that they never quite broke. And it, in my mind, limited their ability to ever save money, invest money, or enjoy money. Because I am a product of them, I believe that I am also a product of that limitation mindset, a mindset that I have feverishly tried to break ever since I realized that I was in that mindset, which probably was only within the last 2 to 3 years. Making a lot of money does not mean that you are in an abundance mindset. In fact, money can often obfuscate the mindset that you have. It's that whole miserable millionaire or miserable billionaire. You hear this all the time anecdotally in popular culture. A lot of these self-help gurus, they will come out into an audience, or they'll have a podcast, or they'll have a YouTube video, and they'll comment, or they will have a specific segment about how many of the high net worth people that they are counseling, that they're working with, that they're coaching, are absolutely miserable. They have everything money could buy. They have money in abundance, but they don't feel that abundant mindset. And what is that abundant mindset in reality? It's feeling free. It's feeling that you don't have the weight of obligations and the weight of expectations on your shoulders. That is something that I lacked for years, even though I was making money. So to see that so many people now are also feeling this lack, that the money isn't going as far as it did, that we're starting to penny pinch, and when you've got a single man who doesn't have any children penny pitching in a grocery store, something's going on. What happened in my head was I actually went on this seesaw of, do I really care about whether or not I'm spending this much money on item A or item B? And then countering that with, what kind of jackass are you? You don't want to throw away money Countering that with, well, you don't want to be in this mentality of lack, which is in opposite to a mentality of abundance. And then the epiphany. Abundance has nothing to do with money in hand. There are plenty of people with money in hand that are miserable with money in hand. Abundance has to do with having enough money where you can give it away or even lose it, and you don't feel the weight of that gift or that loss. That you are more than content, and you know that more money is coming. That you know that really more abundance is coming, because that abundance is freedom. Your abundance is basically freedom from caring about money to such a high degree. You've all been gambling, right? Of course you have. What's the axiom when it comes to gambling? Scared money never wins. Money is a fickle mistress, and it's very peculiar in how you court her. You have to give money your attention, and you very often need to be specific in that attention, the goals that you have, how you're going to go about achieving them. But just like someone that you're pursuing, I was about to say just like a woman, but I believe that this is a unisex phenomenon, because you can want too much or you can care to too high a degree regardless of your gender. Just like someone that you're trying to court, if you place too much attention on them, if you place too much significance, if you get too attached, particularly attached to a certain type of outcome, what happens? Like sand through your fingers. History repeats itself. Things are starting to happen again. Things that people in this country went through in the 70s and went through in the 30s. We're seeing it happen again. You're seeing more and more people fall into homelessness, more and more people not being able to live within the amount of money that they're making, being priced out of certain markets. For my part, I'm now penny pinching. I'm now looking more closely at my budget, and I'm trying to balance that with the weight of lack, of feeling lack, like there's not any more money coming. I think we're all feeling it. I think that was the feeling. What comes through me is this feeling permeates populations periodically over the course of time, and even in the most abundant country that's ever existed on the face of the earth, United States of America, it has permeated this population several times over the course of the last 100 years. Looking at that from below instead of above, is it not a blessing? Is it not teaching us that abundance and money are not exactly correlated? That one can feel abundant because one feels free, and that may or may not be tied to money. When we are free enough that we can give away money or that we can lose money without it having such a negative effect on our lives, then we are truly free. And that is what came through me, dear listener. Are we truly free? Do we believe that by working as hard as we work and saving the way that we save and having this money in an investment account, a number for us to look at on a piece of paper, that it's ever going to bring us happiness? Perhaps we do. And perhaps we need to wake up that it's not going to ever happen. That no matter what that figure is on that piece of paper or whatever material items we're able to obtain with that money, we're never going to truly feel free until we feel free. And what is that freedom? What does it feel like? It's that paradox. The paradox being you've got money such that you want to give it away, or you don't mind losing some of it. You never lose that feeling of freedom. In fact, you have every faith, you have every confidence, you trust that more money is coming. There is no more difficult time to do that than a time like now, where our money is not going nearly as far as it once did, and many people within the population are feeling this trepidation that they're not going to have but so much money coming in before they are downsized or they lose additional money in their investment accounts. It's like this is some cosmic challenge where we have to raise our consciousness to avoid being sucked into this vortex that is that feeling of lack. I'm here to challenge myself. I'm here to challenge you, dear listener. Can we rise above this feeling of lack, even though we see our money not going as far as it did, but 6, 8, 12 months ago? Can we stay in this feeling of abundance, which at its heart, at its foundation, is the feeling of freedom? That money plays a role in that, but money isn't the apex of that. Every waking moment is an opportunity to be present and to break that spell of getting into the feeling of lack when one starts to feel it. So did I buy the more expensive item? Did I buy the cheaper item? Did I just put it back and not buy anything at all? I did buy the generic item. Why? Because, as I've said in earlier podcasts, I know that most of that price increase is just price gouging, and as an objection to as much, I did get the generic item because I wanted to tell the corporate label to go fuck themselves. In my mind, that was abundance because that was freeing. It was freedom to make that choice consciously, intentionally, knowing that my lack of attachment is inviting to me more money, more abundance.
Act 2 Patriotism, Faith, Family, Money, and the Washington Commanders.
If you aren't aware, the Wall Street Journal did a poll about patriotism, about religion, about child rearing, and money. And they've been conducting the poll periodically since 1998. The social medias and the pundit class had food for fodder because the numbers were dire. They were bleak. They were dim. Religion, down. Patriotism, down. People who want to have children or aspire to have children, way down. The only thing that went up as a value, as something that was very important to people, was money. And in particular, the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Xers. Now the pundit class on social media, on the cable news networks, they get to go and gnaw on this bone. They get to come out and say, what's going on in this country? I just don't understand. What about patriotism? What about religion? What about core American values? Since Christmas of last year, here's what's happened in this country. The airlines completely shit the bed during the holidays and then did it again and then did it again. It turns out that they're using archaic technologies in order to run one of the most complex airline systems in the world. These airlines are completely understaffed after having been given a ton of money in the pandemic. And guess what they did? They took all of this money and they did massive stock buybacks, thereby crippling their ability to do what they primarily are in business to do, and that's fly airplanes. What about the choo-choo trains? The choo-choo trains. The same story. They have completely gutted their entire infrastructure in order to get down to bare bones costs and expenses after having taken money in the pandemic and doing what with it? Well, when it comes to the railroads, they've been doing this for over a decade. Stock buybacks. Can't invest any of the money back into their business, and it's a complete shambles. And what happens? You've got a derailment in East Palestine, which left such toxic chemicals in proximity to one another that the authorities, the powers that be, elect to blow it up, sending plumes of toxic smoke into the air, spreading the chemicals far and wide into the ground. One of the largest frauds of federal public assistance funds is discovered in the state of Mississippi, with many of the principals, the luminaries in state government, including the governor, including 2 governors, as well as one Brett Favre, using the money that is allocated by the federal government to the states to help, namely single mothers with children under the poverty line, purchase food. Yes, food, and sometimes shelter. These luminaries of state government end up spending the money on pet projects, many of them not even outside of the constraints of their own budget. They just had this pot of money to use, and so they used it. They didn't even need it. As I stated in an earlier episode, you have the Federal Reserve raising interest rates at an accelerated rate in order to drive more people into unemployment. Because Treasury bills shoot up, and the Treasury bills that were sold 12 months ago are now trash. You've got two different banks, which, by the way, were completely mismanaged in the way that they diversified their risk. They had 10 or more account holders with $1 billion in that bank in individual or solitary accounts. Consequences for these actions? Let's see. The airlines? None. The railroads? None. The banks? None. Even in the case of the fraud in Mississippi, misappropriating federal funds, I believe all the actions are state actions. I'm not sure the federal government has taken any action thus far. And to top it all off, the icing on the cake, the cherry on top of the sundae, it comes out not 24 hours ago, recording this segment on March the 28th, the year of our Lord 2023, that there are several bids to buy the Washington Commanders from one Daniel Snyder, and these bids, plural, I put an S on the end, which means there's more than one bid. These bids are all reportedly in the $6 billion range. $6 billion with a B, that denotes more than a million, right? It's lots of millions. It's tens of millions. It's hundreds of millions. $6 billion to buy the Washington Commanders from one Daniel Snyder. I said it before and I'll say it again. Dan Snyder could be reported to sacrifice puppies to the altar of greed, and at this point no one would bat an eye at it. For everything that man has done to bring disrepute to the NFL, to the Washington Commanders, to the D.C. area, to the Southern Maryland area, to the Northern Virginia area, to Richmond, Virginia. Yes, I do remember the whole debacle with the practice facility. The man bought the Washington Commanders for $800 million, I believe, in 1997, and he's going to sell it for $6 billion in the year of our Lord 2023. Put it all into perspective, dear listener. What are we teaching the youngest generation in this country? Or the generation before that, or the generation after that? I mean, if you're below the age of 30, if you're below the age of 35, what lessons have you learned over the course of the time that you've been on planet Earth? We only honor the golden rule, and that is, he who has the gold makes the rules. There is this overtone in the media, the pundits, social media, cable news. There's this overtone that somehow this youngest generation, or these people below the age of 30, 35, they're materialistic and they're lost. No, dear listener, no. They're simply practical. Consider the world that young people live in. You can't make it in 21st century America without a college degree. They go to college, it's a complete and total ripoff. It's really more about socialization than it is about education. And then when they graduate, they get this patronizing pat on the back and the words of wisdom. Well, it's not really a college degree anymore that's required in order to make it in the United States. You have to get a graduate degree, and you have to take on even more debt. There aren't enough homes, and so the price on any home that you're going to try to bid on is going to be outrageous. And in that bidding process, you're going to be competing with tons of other people, likely with cash. When that's not the case, and maybe you can get a house, you're going to have to pay interest rates that haven't been around since the 1970s, and it may very well price you out of buying that house from a monthly payment standpoint. Everything costs more. Everything is now scarce and expensive. Gone are the days of loyalty to any one corporation, any one organization, any one job. The job market for young people has been capitalized. It is a true market economy whereby they're mercenaries. They don't feel any loyalty or fealty to any one employer. They're going to go where they are treated the best and they can get the most money. And I'm not that out of the loop that I don't hear from people that young people don't work hard. Well, I believe many of them feel, rightfully so, dear listener, that they're just a number, that they're just a cog in a machine. There is demand for loyalty in the job market, just like there's demand for loyalty in politics and there's demand for loyalty in religion. Is loyalty reciprocated? No. Harken back to this very piece. What about the airlines? What about the railroads? Just cutting staff as quickly as they could to cut costs in order to create the leverage for massive stock buybacks so they could just return any profit that they were making to shareholders. Give young people some credit. They see business for what it is. All of these companies work in service of one thing, and that's the shareholder. It's not the employees, it's not the clients or the customers, it's not the community. All of that stuff makes for good public relations, but in reality, everything works in service of the stockholders. As a young person, would you not then become a mercenary in your own right if that's the way the market presented to you? Hell, as an old, I look at the market and I see it for what it is, and I see myself the same way, as a mercenary. It is a fool's errand to look at what's going on in the country today and for people who are older to act like they understand what younger people are going through. This is an unprecedented time. If you were looking at the country through the eyes of, let's say, a 26-year-old, and you're seeing all these people in power not just make mistakes, but make asinine mistakes, make asses out of themselves, try to popularize and push narratives that are nothing more than a dog and pony show, that are a distraction, when those that preach patriotism and religion and family, when you see from their words their actions only being in service of money, why would you not also value most in this world money? Yes, dear listener, I agree with you that the sadness device that is Instagram, that is TikTok, that is Snapchat, yes, that contributes to the materialization of the younger generations. They no doubt want the bling and they want to be able to show it off. But for many of them, it is in fact a practical consideration, one that they have to make in order to survive in this new paradigm in the 21st century in the United States. And beyond any practical consideration, look at what the reward is for being materially obsessed, for being completely money oriented, treating other people like shit, racism, misogyny, very likely committing tax fraud, both federal and state, and on top of all of that, being petty as hell when it comes to your own reputation and the things that are said about you in public. And on top of that, hell, that's cherries on top of cherries on top of the sundae. You cut down a shitload of trees on your property in violation of state law. Take that, nature. Just like the airlines, just like the railroads, the underlying product, the asset, the business that you run, well, you just take something that was sacrosanct to people, something that actually was a crown jewel of the industry that you bought into, and you drive it directly into the ground, alienating your colleagues, alienating your fan base, alienating the community, and you turn $800 million into $6 billion as a consequence of all of those actions. My God, That's the reason why we love all of those action movies, right? Those superhero movies and those Bond type movies and all of these different John Wick movies. We want to see the good guy win because he or she rarely ever does.
Act 3. What are the costs and expenses in a life insurance policy, and what are you actually paying for?
Another segment on money and investing, this one specific to life insurance. And a lot of people don't understand, or they've been misled, and I'm using that word selectively, tactfully, because I believe many of the people who speak to life insurance do so in a way where they are either willfully ignorant or they want people to fail to understand how costs and expenses are assessed in a life insurance policy. There are 3 different types of expenses in a life insurance policy. You have a premium charge, you have an expense charge, and you have the cost of insurance. Let's be clear about what a life insurance policy is. It is insuring your life. So when you hear a lot of the financial gurus talk about life insurance and that it's a bad investment because the cost of insurance ruins any cash accumulation that you have in the policy, that's kind of true. Again, it's kind of true. Let's walk down this path very quickly. What is the premium charge? It's pretty much what you'd expect it to be in an insurance policy, in a life insurance policy to be specific. It's a charge that comes out of the premium that you pay into the policy. What does the premium charge pay for? It's very simple. You take out a policy and you are sending in your premium every month. And in that umbrella, there are premium charges, expense charges, and cost of insurance. The premium charge, if you actually have a life insurance policy and you go and you look at the illustration and it has the cost laid out, the premium charge is essentially what you're paying the insurer, the insurance company, to pay for the sales and marketing of the policy. This is the money that goes to the advisor, or it is part of the fee that you are paying that ends up going to the advisor for marketing and selling the policy. That fee is amortized over the life of the policy. So you often see that the premium charge is going to be a fixed amount over the life of the policy. And yes, after a certain number of years, sometimes it will increase. And again, there are so many different types of life insurance policies. It's impossible for me to come out and say, this is what happens in every policy. Most every policy is different. They're almost like automobiles. You can say, I want an automobile and I'm going to get 4 wheels and a seat. Beyond that, there are so many different options. It's hard to say this is what's standard in every single automobile. Okay. Your premium charge also pays for taxes. So it's basically the insurance company collecting money that it's going to pay to the sales advisor, the agent, the life insurance rep, and it's going to pay taxes. There's also what's called an expense charge. Now, the expense charge is what you would think that it is. It is not free to set up a life insurance policy. There are a number of costs that the life insurance company has to take on in order to set that policy up and then manage it over what? The course of your life. So you can say that the expense charges are the administrative fees that the life insurance company is having to spend in order to set up and maintain your policy. Now we get to the big one, the cost of insurance. The cost of insurance is exactly what you would think it is. It is the amount of money that you're spending to obtain, to purchase, to buy the death benefit. That's right. So when you hear all of these financial gurus talk about these insurance policies and these costs, and they either mix them all up or they just throw out something like, oh, the cost of insurance ruins any growth or accumulation inside the policy, you are actually buying something that is not for sale in a 401k. It's not for sale in an IRA or an ETF or a mutual fund or an index fund. It is a death benefit. You are paying for the benefit to be paid out upon your death. Generally, when you look at the cost of insurance and you compare it to the death benefit, it is a fraction of that amount. In other words, you may pay a certain amount in the cost of insurance, but you are buying the eventual death benefit, and generally the amount that you are paying for that cost of insurance to obtain the death benefit is far less than the actual death benefit itself. Note that you're going to hear a lot from people about, oh, this is how the cost of insurance is factored in and blah, blah, blah. Just be aware, dear listener, insurance policies have an underlying assumption that you're going to live to 120. The age that the insurance and the money that you actually put into the policy becoming level, balancing out, that happens at age 120. And this isn't to say that there aren't some poorly structured whole life policies, some poorly structured universal life policies. There certainly are. My point here in this very short, very limited segment is to point out there are different charges and expenses inside of a life insurance policy. And the one that is often demonized is never put into its proper context. When you buy a life insurance policy, there is a cost of insurance, and that individual cost is to obtain a death benefit. You're buying something with that cost. The fact that you are able to accumulate cash value in a policy is in a completely different category. It's a completely different segment, which I will touch on later on in this very podcast season. I will also be touching on the fact that yes, although there are expenses inside of a life insurance policy, these expenses added together in aggregate are often far lower than what you pay in a management fee and an administrative fee in your 401k, in an index fund, in any type of ETF. To hear so many pundits say that life insurance is too expensive and yet advocate for their clients to go out and invest in mutual funds, in index funds, in other types of managed products with these increasing management fees, open-ended management fees. It's the pot calling the kettle black. That too will be fodder for a segment later on this season. This is why I don't vote a podcast.